Are you able to live in Italy while working for a U.S. employer? Sal and Kevin prove that it's possible, and now live permanently in the beautiful Florence, Tuscany. Today, they sit down and tell us how they rented a beautiful home, obtained their visa, and are now living their new dream lifestyle in Italy.
Originally, when we lived in the United States, I was working in corporate in sort of a human resources capacity, and then I left the corporate world to go into higher education teaching HR. It was a busy American work life, working 60, 70 hours a week, rarely taking a day off, and when I did, worrying about work the whole time.
Yeah, and it was kind of the same. I was working for a corporate job, more hours than I'd prefer to admit, but also kind of having our own side business because we were trying to develop our own idea in our own work environment, but we were working way too much. But I guess in American standards, kind of normal, but it still felt like a lot when we knew we didn't want to work that much. And I think that was part of why we wanted to move here, knowing that we would be working solely for ourselves and kind of would be more in control of how often, how little. It kind of just allowed us to just feel like masters of our own day, honestly. And I think that's kind of why we decided to come here.
We got married in New York 10 years ago and came to Italy on our honeymoon. We toured around every city that was in the movie Under the Tuscan Sun. It's so cheesy to say that out loud, but that,
It's true.
Yeah, that was the big surprise.
I don't think we're the only ones.
No, probably not. And we came here, we visited Rome, Florence, Positano on the Amalfi Coast, Cortona, and just were so astounded at how different the lifestyle was, how it just felt different. We felt different being here. And Sal joked that we'd have to have people carry him onto the plane to get him to leave. But we went back to the U.S. and immediately started planning our escape. Took a few years of doing, but the whole idea of us starting our own side businesses in addition to our full-time work was part of building that path where we wanted to be able to do some kind of work that we could carry with us when we moved overseas.
What's funny though is we worked 9 to 5 back in the U.S. or 9 to whatever, but now that we work for ourselves, we work kind of 24/7 because we have our schedule here and then we have our American clients, so we have to meet the time change back in the U.S. But even though we're working more often, just because we're in more control of it, it kind of feels more fluid. So it still is nice, still a reward.
We've traveled together to lots of different places around Western Europe. We've been to London, to Madrid, to Barcelona, to Paris. Ultimately, every time we visit someplace else, at least in my mind, I sort of compare that to how that stacks up against Italy. And I always find, oh, this is nice, but it's not Italy. And any of those places would be lovely. But here in particular, I find that my shoulders drop when I'm in Italy. I relax, I sort of exhale in a way that I never allowed myself to in the US. Even when traveling to other places, I was often traveling but working while I was there because I felt like I was never allowed to take a day off or just truly disconnect. And hear something about the culture of the Italian people and just the customs and the norms and the way people live their life day to day. It allows for that and even encourages that in a way that I just haven't experienced elsewhere. I think it feels cultural. Even in conversations that we have with friends here in Italy, the conversations are often around what's most important and finding that balance. And work is not everything. And why would you do that when you could do this? And this is the healthier lifestyle and better way of being with your family and with your friends and so on. And you hear conversations like that in the U.S., but they're usually about if only we had this, and I know it should be like that, but I can't let it be.
Yeah, and I mean, Tuscany specifically, just because we had spent most of our honeymoon here, and since then like how Kevin was saying, we had such a connection to this area, to this region, and we kept coming back. And we've come back so frequently. We, at the time, and I think still do think that we kind of surpassed the honeymoon phase of it, like being swept up in the romanticism of just being away and being on holiday. We came here so frequently, it started feeling like a second home. I mean, literally from once every 2 years to almost once a year to then by the time we really were trying to move here, twice a year. So eventually it just made sense that we kept coming here for a reason, so why not kind of reestablish ourselves and start building a ground here. We never wanted to buy property in the US. We never wanted to set a foundation for ourselves in the US because we weren't sure where we wanted to be. And that was over 10 years ago we started talking about that. And here was just the first place where it clicked and it felt appropriate, it felt right. It just felt like what we wanted to do.
We started leaning into really exploring the area more. You know, what is it like to live here, not just be on vacation? When I was in the U.S. the last few years, I was working as a professor, so I had more flexibility in my summer months. So 1 month I came and stayed for a month in Siena, a town here in Tuscany, and it was the first time I'd experienced what it was like having to take out the garbage and, you know, deal with the routines of day-to-day life for more than
Italy is the first time that you had to take out the garbage?
The first time I was in Italy that it felt like I wasn't on vacation. And so, and then the last year that we were really planning to move here, we topped out at 3 visits to Italy that year, and we're like, it'd be cheaper just to live there than to keep traveling back and forth.
Exactly.
And I got to spend the last summer before we moved, I spent here in Florence specifically to really see what it was like to be here for an extended period. And that just sealed the deal right there. Well, we quickly found out through some research that it wasn't anywhere near as easy as we thought it would be. It seemed like it would just, well, it's the modern virtual world. You can work anywhere you have a laptop. And, you know, while technically you can get away with that if you're on a short holiday somewhere, to live here legally and work legally, it's very bureaucratic. You have to go through a process of getting a visa from the country you want to move to that says you're allowed to move to that country. Here in particular, we had to get working visas, which are very hard to come by. As self-employment visas, they only give out a few hundred a year normally, and so that required a lot of paperwork, some professional assistance in order to make that happen.
Yeah, I think what we learned, because honestly, we just knew we wanted to come here, but the best route of going about it was seeking legal advice. And quickly we realized that everyone's journey to move here is different. You know, everyone wants to, I mean, most people say they want to move to Italy, and it sounds easier said than done, but once we put the logistics into play, I think the surprising thing was we found out the best route for us to apply. We thought we knew, but after seeking advice, we were told a different route, a different game plan that worked to our benefit that we weren't expecting. And I think the funny thing is, and we can talk about this later as far as the logistics go, but once we thought we were done, we realized there were like 10 more steps to do, or another thing to apply for or register for. And it's just given me a lot of respect for as far as like immigration in general and people just relocating. Because I have our own viewpoint for people wanting to go to the US, and we think our system's complicated. But now coming in this direction, it's just been a completely eye-opening experience and very, very humbling. But I think we couldn't have done that without just going through the legal guidelines and understanding what would be the best route for us. Because I know our journey isn't going to be the same as anyone else's. And we tell that to friends of ours who are considering moving to Europe or just to another country. But you just got to map it out for yourself and just be prepared that things are not going to be the way you expect it, or it's not going to be as simple as you expect it to be. So you can elaborate more on this too, but we found out that we needed to find an apartment before we were even legally told we were allowed to live here. So in order for our visa to be approved, we had to have a signed lease, which makes no sense when you think about it, that we had to have a signed agreement that we had a place to live.
And a receipt showing we paid for it.
Before we were even allowed in this country to live here. So that's part of why we signed our apartment almost 6 months before we were even told we could live in it. And so it's an investment risk. But we had that settled, and we knew we were waiting for our permission to come in, our passports to come in. And once we found that, we had already done our research prepping for a yes, anticipating the best, expecting the worst. But we had decided that we were going to move with very minimal, very little, and then when push came to shove, we decided to move with more things than we intended to. So we ended up hiring a freight forwarder to bring many of the things we couldn't part with. Furniture aside, we got rid of all the furniture, but we soon realized that we are sentimentalists at heart, and we had a lot of things we just did not want to put in storage and pay for or leave behind and completely forget about. But the funny thing about that, the lesson is we were waiting for our products for like our things for about 4 months until it arrived. So we had lived such minimal lives that entire time since we settled into this apartment. And by the time everything arrived, we looked at over 60 boxes and we were curious and like, I don't even want any of this. Why did we do this? But we're happy that it's here. But I think it was an investment. I think we would recalibrate if we were given the second opportunity. And I would challenge anyone who is planning on moving, deciding what to bring, to really start a slow process of omitting, and really ask yourself if it's worth the investment to haul it over or just start new. Because I was surprised, for me personally, surprised that we did so well and we're so happy without so many things that we had in our comfort in the US.
We were a little sneaky knowing that we had that 6-month window when we didn't yet have our visa, but we had every reason to expect that it would be approved. We visited a couple of times, and every time we brought suitcases full of things that we could just leave here. We even had friends come with us on one trip, and each of them, they were like pack mules bringing 2 of our suitcases apiece. So when we moved here and actually arrived after leaving the US entirely, we had, and we had enough to completely live comfortably here with our clothes, our dishes, some of our personal mementos and so on. But to Sal's point, by the time the shipment was finally being delivered, we couldn't even remember what we were missing. And you read in the groups, like Smart Move Italy has a Facebook group for people that are thinking about moving to Italy, and they have conversations, what should I leave behind? And our answer now is, if you can't take it on the plane with you, you probably don't need it. It's often more trouble than it's worth trying to bring over a lot of things here, when usually it's a good excuse, we've discovered, to kind of start fresh and see what you really want and need, not just what you're used to keeping because it's easy to put in a moving truck.
Yeah, I think our calibration was, is this replaceable and how easy would it be to replace? Because I would say 20 of those boxes were books. And we knew it'd be hard to rebuild our library of English books here without paying probably more. So essentially, I think that's kind of how we measured it out on what is replaceable, and if it is, how much is it to replace? Because we didn't have our grandmother's coffee table or things like to that nature, that type of antiques. We had other small sentimental pieces. And I think the biggest thing was my bike. I have a piece of furniture that's not an heirloom, but it's something that I absolutely treasure, and I just could not part with it. So I think it's just you measure it out. But lamps, unless it's a special lamp, you can get a new lamp or things of that nature.
We found Smart Move Italy after we had already started the legal process with an attorney. So we had already taken care of most of that stuff. They were super helpful in a lot of the kind of the psychological aspects of the move, feeling prepared, feeling like we understood what we were getting ourselves into. And in particular, they were super helpful with us narrowing down where we wanted to live and going through the process of negotiating with the landlord and understanding what the lease meant and signing the lease and setting up utilities, a lot of those logistical things.
Yeah, I always refer to it almost as there were therapy sessions. Kevin had found them via Facebook, and I wasn't quick to take an interest in what they were offering because I kept telling myself, like, they're not telling me something I haven't read or I already know. So I didn't have skepticism towards it. I just didn't think I needed it. I'm a big do-it-myself type of person, and I like that challenge. But everything that Kevin was saying, asking the questions to ourselves, why do we want to be here, really challenging our perspective and resetting our expectations, it really kind of set the standard to how we need to be prepared to come here emotionally, psychologically. And now that we have used them with everything that they've helped us with, in negotiating the lease for our apartment, setting me up with a codice fiscale, things I just didn't know how to do while I was still learning the language, having their support and them in our corner. I honestly can say I could not have done this without them by my side. I would suggest to anyone who wanted to do that to use them, because you think you can, And then when you're in it, you realize how quickly alone or confused or lost you might be. And having them as a quick text away, that team honestly made this the easiest transition.
They're like the in case of emergency, break open glass.
Yes.
We went to a government office to
Yes.
go fill out some paperwork and ran into a problem. And with our language barrier, we just were not able to communicate with the man that was literally not letting us in the building. And we one phone call away. We called Alice from Smart Move Italy and explained to her in English what was happening. And she said very quietly and calmly, "Put me on speakerphone," and then just read him the riot act on speaker. And he very quickly said, "Of course, it's right over there. Let us in." And she said, "Give me one more phone call and I'll be heading over there to you."
Yeah, I would say my version of that is it just felt nice to have, being strangers here, it felt nice to have an Italian on our side to kind of speak on our behalf, because what we've learned is it's about community. The service we get as strangers are not going to be the same service you would get as an Italian. And Smart Move Italy prepared us for that and mentioned that, but until you're in that moment and you see the difference, it was really nice and securing in our feelings to know that we had an Italian representative on our side to kind of speak on our behalf when we needed them to.
She literally came with us to sign the apartment lease and was translating for us and explaining things, and I think making it clear to the landlord that we were not going to be those foreigners that get taken advantage of because they don't know any better, because we had our Italian friend on our side there.
I don't want to sound like it's the Beauty and the Beast concept from the first scene, but
Oh.
Kevin and I are very sociable people anyway. Anytime we're at a bar, restaurant, shopping, we always try to make an effort, especially if someone's being nice to us, to get to know them by name. And it's very sweet, but it's somewhat embarrassing, but it's really heartwarming for us that we can walk on our particular street and we get told hello by so many shopkeepers who will collect our mail for us because they're so kind to us, say hello, offer us a glass of Prosecco for walking by if there's something extra. I mean, we have a wine guy, we have restaurant people, we have people who own a pub that we're just really, really friendly and familiar with. And I think that really exceeded our expectations, because the challenging question is we didn't know how we would be as strangers to begin with, but also a married same-sex couple here. We weren't really sure how we would be perceived in this area, and it's been overwhelming how really kind everybody has been to us and supportive and just willing to help out. And not all of them speak English very well. So it's been a good challenge for us, for the ones who can speak English and to the ones who speak more Italian, because it forces us to practice it more. But we've created a really, really wonderful community, and it's been lovely when friends visit and we can't go more than a couple of steps before we see someone that we recognize, and it's just made it feel like a neighborhood.
I think the big trick for me was, one, making a point to learn people's names, because that shows that you're at least taking an interest in them. There's a stereotype of the foreigners that come here and just sort of expect to be waited on as if they're on vacation. And that's very much not who we are. But the other thing is, the first phrase I learned to say in Italian was, "I'm still learning Italian, but I'm trying." And starting conversations with that opens so many doors, because it immediately puts you just a level above a lot of foreigners who expect everyone to cater to them and their language and their customs. Well, there's a great Italian phrase for this, which is piano piano, which is slowly, slowly. Any Italian will know that phrase. And it's a slow process. We kind of kickstarted it a little bit. There are some language schools in any major city in Italy. But here in Florence in particular, there's one that we both went to for a couple of weeks to kind of build that foundation of at least understanding some of the grammar and learning enough to be able to then keep learning on your own. I've been using Duolingo. I'm at like 1,600 and something days in a row. I'm very smug about that. But you're not going to learn the language through those apps, but it can be good repetition and reinforcement. Also things like watching movies that we know, old movies that we grew up with, watching them in Italian, dubbed or with Italian subtitles, can help reinforce some of those things. And then you get to that moment where you're in a movie theater here and you're watching something with the original English audio, but they have Italian subtitles, and you think that is not what they said. They translated that wrong, and he has to shush me. But, yeah.
No, and because we've made so many friends here and we made some connections, and a lot of them are English speakers, they encourage us to speak more Italian, so they challenge us, especially because we've been here now for 2 years, and we are speaking comfortably socially with them, but we have that support in case there's some words we don't know, and they're very, very patient. And some of them want to practice their English too, so it's a trade-off on it. I think we could be better, but I would say to anyone coming here and thinking they can just get by because most people speak English, it means the world, I think, to our friends that we are trying and we are practicing, and it makes us feel more part of the community, that we are allowing ourselves to immerse into the culture just by speaking the language, or at least attempting to. And everyone's been pretty respectful. Some people make fun of us, but we put our pride aside because you have to, and essentially, we know it'll come. But we're getting by. I'm impressed by us. I'm impressed that we've been doing so well with it. And it's, like I said, humbling. This whole experience has just been truly, truly humbling, and we're lucky to have it.
Humbling is a good word for it. It definitely makes you recognize the privilege that you have growing up somewhere where you just know how things work and you intuitively speak the language. I will say one of the things I like about Smart Move Italy is that not only do they help you with things, but they also sort of push you out of the nest a little bit when the time is right. Mm-hmm. We've lived here almost 2 years, and a couple of months ago I needed to take care of a government thing, and I called our friend over at Smart Move Italy. I said, "Can you call and make this appointment for me?" And she says, "Of course I can, but I know you can too. Why don't you try? Let me tell you what you need to say, and you can practice it with me, and then you can call. And if you need help, call me back." And I found that very empowering because she was right. Of course I could. I spoke slowly. I opened with my classic, "I'm still learning to speak Italian," and the government official on the line was very kind and patient, and even gave me a bravo when I said something correctly.
So my first half of the day, I usually am always out walking. I take care of all the shopping. I will go to the grocery store. I'll do most of the exploring just to find out any new restaurants, any events that are going around. So I spend a lot of time on social media just to see if there's any special vintage markets that are around or if anyone's hosting anything as far as events. But typically my first half of the day is usually just out and exploring, introducing myself to the city because it's a small city, but it's still got a lot of treasures and hidden things to find. And that's just locally. There's still so many other places to explore that are a quick train ride away that keep the interest going, keep our enthusiasm of wanting to live here and explore more around here. So as far as like daily habits, it's really kind of just walking and just allowing myself to get lost. No specific destination, unless of course I'm running errands or doing what I need to in the city. But aside from that, we rely on our friends to tell us what events are going around. We have friends who are tour guides, we have friends who are heavily involved in social media, and they're always keeping us active as far as things to experience and things to try here in the city.
But one of the great things about being in Florence is it's so easy to get to other parts of Italy. Or a 2-hour train ride from Rome, from Milan, from Venice. And not only do we enjoy things here in Florence, but it's easy to go to Siena for the Palio in the summer. It's easy to go to Venice for Carnevale. It's easy to go. There's a great restaurant that we like in Milan. You know what? Let's go spend a night in Milan and go have dinner and say hello to our friends there. So it's great to be able to experience those kind of historical, cultural things that are just right outside the train station. Even here, there's Calcio Storico, which is a once-a-year thing, a traditional historic soccer match here that's like soccer and rugby and boxing and MMA all combined. And just knowing that those things are a few steps out the door is incredible. Until they kick us out, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. I think we kind of just say like this is, I think, essentially forever. I mean, our long-term goals is we want to be able to obtain a home in our favorite cities in Italy, from Venice, Milan, Siena specifically, and here in Florence, just so we always have a place to go to and then potentially B&B them and make that part of our income. but we just wanted to have that access because, to Kevin's point, we want to go to a dinner in Milan just for the night. We would like to make that a second home base for us, or a third home base for us. So we really just want to set a foundation here for as long as we can. And we've always said any concerns that we felt like we would have here would be even worse back in the U.S. Now that we're here, we feel the most secure and the most happiest we've ever been. And we're fortunate that when our friends come and visit, they see that and they take the time to mention that to us, that they see the best of us now that we live here. And it's given them an excuse to come overseas more often and spend time with us, which was a concern. We thought we would leave many of our friends and our loved ones behind, living so far away, but we see them just as frequently as if we had lived just a couple of states apart, because it's easily accessible and they see why we are here. They feel why we are here. They get it. And it's rewarding. It's super, super rewarding.
We actually have a shared calendar that we keep track of who wants to visit when, so we're careful that we don't double book people into the guest room. Yeah. Lots of visitors. But to Sal's point, it's validating when they come and they see that we're living our best lives here, that we are so much happier and healthier, and not for nothing, usually when they find out what things cost here, then they all want to know how we moved here because they want to do it too. Cost of living here is so much cheaper than what we are used to in the States. Even in states that were fairly inexpensive by US standards, we pay less for our 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment here than we have for any home we've had in the States. And when I tell people what we pay for utilities and groceries, they have to lie down. It's it's just a major difference what the expenses are here. Depending on where in the U.S., but yeah, maybe even as much as 50%. This apartment in New York would probably be 3 or 4 times what we're paying for it. But even in other states that we've lived in, like North Carolina and Florida, this is still quite a bit cheaper than anything comparable there. One of the things that's been great for us is because we're here with American clients, that's where most of our business comes from, we've been able to afford to live a much higher standard of living here because the cost of living is less here. Of course, the incomes here are appropriate for that cost of living. So it's been great coming from a country with a higher cost of living for us because we get to bring that income, or if you have retirement from another country, it allows your money to go further here than it would back in your home country.
Yeah, I would say, for the most part, the cost of living is easier for us, but there's certain American accommodations we've had a hard time separating for, which we pay a lot more here. So we find ourselves importing some things back from the U.S. just because we know certain things will cost more here versus if we could get it there in the U.S. So it kind of, it varies depending on what it is that you're going for.
If you're going to the U.S., it's important to stock up at a CVS or a Target before you come back.
Oh, Target.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's very complicated, and as with all things, definitely seek out professional advice on this because the internet's not going to tell you everything you need to know about your situation in particular.
Everyone's going to tell you something different.
Yeah. For us, both of us, we're self-employed, but our companies are based in the U.S. Our companies of one, but they're based in the U.S. And so, as an Italian taxpayer, an Italian resident, I send an invoice to my company in Florida, and that company in Florida pays Kevin, Italian resident. And so, in Italy, I'm taxed on what I'm invoicing the company. And in the U.S., it's treated, a single person self-employment is treated the same as the individual. So there it's slightly more complicated, but there are tax agreements in place with a lot of countries, including the U.S., where you're not double taxed on things. So the only thing that I actually pay in the U.S. is essentially the Social Security. That's the only portion of the taxes I still have to pay. Otherwise, I just get a credit for what I'm paying here in Italy. Definitely seek out a commercialista here in Italy and an accountant in the U.S. or wherever you're from.
And open an Italian bank account. I would say Smart Move Italy prepared us enough, but again, it's not until you're here and you start to experience it. I would say the hardest part for me is because I spend so much of my time outside into the city is letting go of standards and expectations that we had from when we lived in the US. As far as operations, things should be this way, that shouldn't be that way. There's easier ways to handle this. And just letting that go, we've become more patient because sometimes you have to wait all day for a package that may not arrive that day. It's just the way things go here. And it's kind of letting go of that and just saying, well, at least we're in Italy. But it's really kind of not allowing ourselves to get frustrated with logistics, operational tactics of the city, the bureaucracy of the way things are run, the government regulations on the way things are run here, and just really kind of allowing ourselves to just look at it, accept it, and then we have our go-to phrase anytime it's when we feel a tension going up, when we're just like, it shouldn't be this way, it should be that way, and we just look at each other, we just say like, normale.
It's just the way it is, you know?
And it makes us feel better. We're like, well, yeah, this is what we chose. This is what we wanted. And kind of just letting the American standard and mindset go. And it's still a practice. We've been here almost 2 years, and we still have to remind ourselves that this is just the way it is here. And just because it was different back home in the US, this is our home now, and it's getting easier and easier. But I would say logistics, operation, and government standards, and learning how things are run and what is expected of us.
Yeah, we learned very quickly. You can't move to Italy and should all over it, in the sense that it should be this, it should be that. No, that's not going to work for you.
I swore you said something different. I like that.
Yeah, you may not be able to use that. I don't know.
I would say use it.
But as an example, so when we moved here, after we filed the paperwork to get our visa, then we had to, upon arrival, file paperwork for a permit to stay, a permesso di soggiorno. And it's the exact same paperwork that you had to give a different Italian government agency for the visa. Why you can't just say, now give this to them, that's just not how it works. And you sort of have to assume that. And then you wait months and months and months for that appointment. You finally get your permesso, and then you have to go file for residency, and you go to a different government office and bring all of the same paperwork with you again. And then once you get that, then you go to the health agency to sign up for your medical care, and a lot of the same paperwork.
It feels like you're never done.
Yeah.
Like we were told we were allowed to live here, and then we have to go through all this process to be told we're allowed to stay here again and again. But again, that's our version and our story, and we know others might not have to go through the same experience. We might have it better, we might have it worse in some scenarios. And we've met some either people who are here with a student visa or retirement. Everyone's version is entirely different with what they experience at government offices, at medical offices, post offices. It's never the same. So I think if you just let go of what you think it should be, it becomes easier.
It's definitely a question of your perspective. As an example, when our 1-year permit expired, we had to go apply for a renewal. And we were waiting for the appointment. They were supposed to text you, tell you when the appointment will be. And after 3 months, we finally got the appointment. We applied in October, and in January, we got the appointment, and they said it's in March of 2025. So more than a year later. And at first we were thinking that's just ridiculous. It's going to take that long. But then we thought, well, they can't kick us out for another year. So, you have to find the silver linings. I have 2 pieces of advice that are very closely related. 1, do your homework, and 2, get help. You need to do a lot of research to understand all the government processes you're going to have to go through. It's incredibly complicated. There's lots of rules. Whatever the requirements are, you need to exceed those requirements. And take advantage of professional assistance like Smart Move Italy that can help walk you through not only what the rules say, but what actually happens on the ground. Because at the end of the day, all of those processes are at the whim of the person you're in front of at that moment.
I would say things that we did specifically for us that I would encourage. We spent a lot of time in Florence. We would base here and then travel elsewhere throughout Italy, but we became so familiar and comfortable. We knew what to expect from what the city has to offer, the neighborhood, the energy, the conveniences, the not conveniences, some of the obstacles. We were already prepared for that versus moving to a town blindly that we just visited for 4 days or 5 days. So not allowing ourselves to get swept up in the wine, bread, and cheese and pasta and pizza of Tuscany, and really kind of making it feel as close to a normal for us. And the other thing is, aside from using Smart Move Italy and having all of those seminars of asking the questions, what is your why? What is your purpose? What is it that you're really looking for? And really kind of digging deep and testing yourself. But one thing we did specifically is we actually also just did couples counseling. Moving is hard to begin with, just town to town, state to state, country to country. We knew emotions and tensions would run high. So I think one of the best things we did, at least as a couple, is we took a couple of therapy sessions just to really kind of reevaluate how we communicate with each other, how we listen to each other. And one of the best sessions I think we had was understanding what's going to not trigger, but potentially set us off as far as like having a bad day and how to support each other. Because I know I moved here with the anxiety of, I don't know anybody here except my husband. I've moved everywhere having a job, or at least having some familiar face or friends. And here was completely alone with a purpose built from the ground up. I did not have a reason to move here. And I wanted to be prepared in case I came home from the post office completely distraught or frustrated because I didn't speak the language or I didn't understand what was happening. And Kevin needed to understand how to communicate with me and give whatever extra percent he needed to support because of whatever circumstance I faced in this strange world. It's mentally and emotionally anguishing as much as it is uplifting. And I think allowing that balance and being prepared to anticipate it is the best thing you can do, because it's not all roses. It's
not all under the Tuscan sun.
It's not all under the Tuscan sun. There's a lot of things that we had to prepare for, and thankfully we had each other to do it. And we've made such a community that kind of helped make it more comfortable for us. But I would say utilize all of Sam's classes and what she offers, because it made me think about things I didn't originally think about. And again, having them in our corner was a huge help. And then just the couples counseling, again, because you might think you've thought of everything, but unless you're really prepared for it, this has just been one of the easiest transitions we've ever made. With all the complications that are involved with it, it's been absolutely worth it, and I don't regret a single minute of it. Every morning, every night, every opportunity we get to walk around these cobblestone streets has been such a gift, and we worked hard for it. We prepared mentally for it, and it's just been incredible.
The other thing I would say is I think it's super important when you move, especially to a country like Italy, you need to quickly build community. You need to have the people that know your name and that are happy to see you and that are there to help you if you have any questions or if you need a friendly ear. It's so great for us to be able to walk down our street and see people who are excited to see us because they've gotten to know us. That makes this feel like home, at least for me.